into clear focus through the lens of a Judeo-Christian worldview. And now, here is your host, Bannon House.
And welcome to the broadcast on this Friday night, March 13th. Whoa! It's Friday the 13th, Logan? Woo! I'm not superstitious. But anyway, that is funny. Friday the 13th. Glad you're with us. Oh, boy. We got a big program tonight. We finally found him. We're going to have on Trevor Loudon. We're going to have on Trevor Loudon. Look at this headline. Infiltration alert. Russia's Alexander Dugin sinister plot to destroy Trump's MAGA movement. That's from the Rare Foundation. We were quoting from that, showing graphics out of that. There's our buddy, Trevor. And Trevor's going to go into this in great detail tonight. And what is MAGA communism? We're going to give you some examples tonight of what is MAGA communism. And more about Alexander Dugin. Some call him Putin's brain. And Trevor Loudon says that the American version of Alexander Dugin is a Curtis Yarvin, who is talked about in this book by Patrick Wood and Courtney Turner. So we're going to talk about dark MAGA. We're going to talk about MAGA communism, how the movement has been infiltrated the same way they infiltrated and hijacked the Tea Party and destroyed that. We're going to talk about Iran, the Strait of Hormuz, boots on the ground, where we're going with that. Has Trump been walked into a trap? What about all the terrorists in the country? Joe Kent says 18,000 terrorists in the country. I got a little math I want to do with you tonight. See what you think about something I've been thinking about. I'll share that with you when we get Trevor here because I want his response. Oh, we got a lot to do. Here's the headline tonight. Pentagon approves deployment of Marine expeditionary unit of about 2,500 Marines in the Middle East. Well, here we go. Boots on the ground. Where is all this going, and how does it fit in with multipolarity? That's a word we've been using a lot the last 48 hours. Multipolarity, something being pushed by Alexander Dugin. Talk to Trevor about that, because I think what that really means is regional governance. Regional governance. A North American Union, a South American Union, a European Union. But who's going to control these various unions? Russia? China? We'll get into all that. I guarantee you we're going to talk about things you're not going to hear anywhere else. So why don't you tweet, text, email, Facebook, Getter, Truth Social. Have all your family and friends tune in right now. How about Steve Bannon? What happened to him? Let's have Trevor, who was a guest on Bannon's show a few times. Let's have Trevor Loudon tell us what he thinks about Steve Bannon and what has happened to Steve Bannon. And then I want to talk about Tucker Carlson. Because I think Tucker Carlson, in my opinion, one of the goals of Tucker Carlson is to make Christians the enemy, to set up Christians for persecution. I want to ask Trevor Loudon about that tonight. Now, one way we're brought to you, and it's going to be a long format interview with no commercial breaks. Okay? So tweet, text, email, Facebook, Getter, Truth Social, long format interview with Trevor Loudon, no commercial breaks. But how do we pay for it all? Well, we have some sponsors like Bella Grace. I've already taken my Bella Grace today. There it is. And folks, my inflammation in my neck, the inflammation in C6, C7, going down my arm, my finger's numb. Good news is my thumb's not numb. My middle finger's not numb anymore. Now it's just the index finger. So I'm making improvement. But when did all this start? Largely started when we ran out of Bella Grace because of the ice storm here for 2 weeks and couldn't get delivery. Inflammation came roaring in, and that's when the problem started. Now herniated disc in C6, C7. Getting better, but long way to go yet. But the wife has ordered up a lot of extra Bella Grace, so if there's ever an interruption, like the power grid goes down and we get hacked, which, by the way, we're hearing reports the government is more and more worried about all the cyber attacks by Iran. Yeah, something we've been talking about for years. So I said to the wife, order up a bunch of Bella Grace. Power grid goes down. They can't get shipments out. I don't want to be without this. So melissahousebg.com. I take it every day. I highly believe in it. You should too. High-end collagen with the peptides cut short so your body actually absorbs 95% versus flushing 95%. Cat's claw, that's an anti-inflammatory that I've been talking about. And then astaxanthin takes on the free radicals. That actually crosses the brain-blood barrier. Bella Melts, that stimulates your body's natural GLP-1. Stimulates your body's natural GLP-1. Bella Melts. Check all that out at melissahousebg.com. Over 100 clinical trials, by the way, on the Bella Grace. All those great products, including the skincare that Melissa loves. melissahousebg.com. Of course, if you go to worldviewtube.com/sponsors, you'll find a lot of things like Swish for Life, Numi, loaded with glutathione to detox your cells. Swish with it for about 3 minutes. It's in your bloodstream within about 90 seconds. Again, some studies show it may remove mercury from your brain, helping prevent Alzheimer's, dementia, and Parkinson's. You guys know I take the Gatatana every day. Gatatana. One little scoop is the equivalent of 90 billion plant cells. There's over 5 clinical trials on this. And you know I give the pet product to Dolly every day, half a scoop to her. This is highly, highly important because this gets down to your mitochondria level of your cells to feed your cells and to boost your immune system so your immune system can fight off all the different things coming against it. Like free radicals that cause you know what, the big C word. So these are 3 things I do every day. Numi, Gatatana, and Bella Grace. And they're all available at worldviewtube.com/sponsors, worldviewtube.com/sponsors. Now, before we go to Trevor, one of the most important ways you can support us is through our foundation, worldviewfoundation.com. Can you afford $10 a month? $20 a month? I'm not asking you to give $1,000 a month. Some of you do. God bless you because you make up for all the people that aren't giving the $10, $20 a month. If it wasn't for those of you who are giving $1,000 a month, the $500 a month, the $250 a month, we'd be in big, big trouble. Because there's far too many people out there watching our programs that can afford to give $10, $20 a month that are not for whatever reason. I have no idea. I'm not talking about the people that can't afford it. I understand that. That's why we push it out as broadcast and education ministry for those who can't afford it. We want to also reach those who would never watch this behind a paywall so we can bring them into the fold. But if it wasn't for the people that give more than $20 a month, we'd be in big trouble. But we ought to be able to fund the whole network just on enough people giving $10, $20 a month. So if you're out there tonight and you can give $100, $250, $500, please do, to make up for the people that can't afford to give anything and to make up for the $10, $20 a month people who won't give $10, $20 a month, even though they can afford to do it, but won't do it. I don't know why they won't. But there's a lot of them that watch this program. They love to watch our show, and they can afford to give, but they never do. I don't know. I don't get it. I just don't get that mentality. So thank you to those that give more than $10, $20 a month. But I need a lot of you to step up who can give $10, $20 a month and give it. Please. Worldviewfoundation.com, worldviewfoundation.com. We got to bring in over 40 grand a month just to keep pushing out free Christian worldview programming. I'm not going to go through the laundry list of our bills, but man, it's nonstop, people. The bills are coming across my desk. Credit card statements I'm looking at. I'm like, Logan, what's this? Who's this company? Oh, they do this for us. Well, who's this company? They do that for us. The licenses we have to have. The software licenses and not to mention the IT costs. Our IT guy texted me last night, said, yeah, I'm working on a problem just to keep your stream up. You're under attack. Did you know that our network is under attack constantly? Constant under attack by different countries, bots, trying to bring our network down. And we have an IT guy that spends a lot of his time just fighting them off, putting in more security, putting up more firewalls constantly. And that guy doesn't do it for free. And we don't ask him to. He has a family. He has children. He has grandchildren. He's worthy of being paid. A workman is worthy of his hire. So we have to bring in over 40 grand a month to stay afloat. So please go right now to worldviewfoundation.com, make a contribution. Thank you to all of you that do. I want to make sure I say thank you enough to those of you that are supporting us. this network would not be around if you didn't support us. We wouldn't. There's no way we could afford to pay the bills. This is a listener-supported network. We're not supported by any country. We don't get money from Israel. We don't get money from any Israeli PAC or group. We don't get any money from any kind of MAGA PAC or group. We are a listener-supported organization. Individuals support us. Individuals. Families. Married couples. We are truly a listener-supported network. So I want to, again, make sure I go out of my way to say thank you to all of you that are supporting us. And if you're not, please do so at worldviewfoundation.com if you can afford to do so. If you cannot, just pray for us and promote us. We got to get going. Joining me now is Trevor Loudon. You guys heard me quoting him quite a bit yesterday on our programs, and I said I was trying to track him down, that he was MIA. Well, we found him, and he's well. I always get nervous when I can't get a hold of Trevor because we don't need to lose Trevor. We've lost Phil Haney and several other truth tellers, but we're glad we found Mr. Trevor Loudon, and he is going to talk to us about Dugin, Alexander Dugin, this guy that's being, I guess, loved on by so many in the MAGA world. And he seems to be the brain of Putin, or the ideological architect of Putin, according to several sources. And we're going to go right to Trevor to see what Trevor's saying about this, because he says there is an American version of Dugin, and his name is Yarvin. We'll get to that. Joining me now is Trevor Loudon to talk about communist MAGA, also dark MAGA, I think. Trevor, welcome. Thanks for being with us, my friend.
It's always a pleasure, Brandon. Thanks for having me on.
I'm glad you're safe and sound. You had me a little worried there when we couldn't find you for 2 days, but glad you're doing well. All right, so you probably didn't have time to watch the shows and all that we covered, but boy, howdy, we went through a lot of stuff. Quoted some of the work you were doing with Amy Meek over at the Rare Foundation, and we played a lot of clips. And I don't know if you've seen these clips. We played clips of Alexander Dugin talking about Islam and how he's disappointed in Islam, that they're not coming together as a coalition to defeat Israel, and that Islam cannot become a great global religion and power structure until it defeats the West and Israel. He says they're acting too much like a little kitten. And I mean, he was full on calling for Islam to be used, from what I picked up in that lengthy interview, for Islam to be used to bring down the West and Israel. Tell me what you know about Alexander Dugin and his influence on certain people in America, i.e., I think Tucker Carlson's interviewed him. Who else is being influenced by him? The floor is yours. Tell us everything we need to know about Alexander Dugin and the MAGA movement.
That's a big mandate. Just on the point of Islam, Dugin sees the world in terms of power blocks, and Islam is a power block that must be mobilized against the West. And so he sees, look, he changes his message for every audience. He'll talk to conservative Catholics with one slightly different message, with evangelicals with another, with Greek Orthodox with another message, Muslims with another message. But his goal is worldwide chaos, of which Russia and China will turn out to be the major beneficiaries. And he openly calls for a civil war in the United States, destruction of the United States. He calls Ukrainians subhumans. He's called for the people of Europe to rise up and kill their masters. He is one evil dude, really is. And the fact that he's got a big following in the United States, including some of our leaders, should be beyond shocking. But to go back, Alexander Dugin was a little, he grew up in the 90s as a sort of young, he's in his 20s in the 90s and late 80s.
Who was?
Alexander Dugin.
Well, he sure looks older than that.
Well, he was really the 80s was his youth.
Okay.
His 80s was his youth. And at that time, he was the the son of a GRU, Russian military intelligence colonel. Some say he was his father was a general, but he was at least a colonel. And he was part of the Moscow elite. And these young kids at that time were pretty rootless. They were into drugs. They were into every Western decadency you could find out. And many of them were into the occult, including young Alexander. There's videos online of him doing a ceremony in honor of Aleister Crowley, for instance, the famous
Really?
British occultist. Oh, yeah, absolutely. He was very much part of the occult circles.
And just for those who don't know, Aleister Crowley was a big occultist. He would be in the metaphysical or the esoteric, hidden truth, new age, cosmic humanism realm.
Yeah, called the tabloids called him at the time the most evil man in the world and the great beast and all this. But he's a big hero in occult circles. And Dugin is on video of him celebrating Crowley, at an event in Moscow in the 90s, celebrating Crowley. So Dugin is recruited by the KGB. And according to one author, the promise, the bait that he was given was full access to the KGB's occult files. The KGB took a lot of the Nazi Germany's material on the occult, for instance. The Nazis were very big occultists. And the KGB has always used the occult, always been interested in the occult as a way of shaping their adversaries, shaping foreign countries, shaping events, both for the magical content and the influence it could have on certain groups. And so Dugin was a founder of the National Bolshevik Party, which was a combination of Nazism and communism. He was an advisor at one point to the head of the Russian Communist Party, Gennady Zyuganov. And he's written several books on global strategy, some of which are required reading by Russian military intelligence officers, Russian military officers in the Russian military academies. And for a long time was called Putin's brain. So Dugin is the originator, so-called. I think he's just a front for the intelligence services, but allegedly the initiator of a concept called two major concepts: Eurasianism, meaning that there will be a world power based on Eurasia, stretching from Siberia to Lisbon and probably encompassing Canada, which will be a sort of white cultural socialist republic. And the rest of the world will be divided amongst the brown races, the Muslim factors and the Chinese spheres and that sort of thing. And also multipolarity. Now you hear multipolarity being talked about at conservative American conferences like it's a good thing. What it means is this, is that America will no longer be the unipolar master of the world. America will no longer be the number one power pole in the world. You can have multipolarity. You'll have a Russian sphere of influence. You have a Chinese sphere, an Iranian sphere, and the world would be divided into spheres of influence. Russia gets Eastern Europe, China gets the Asia Pacific, Iran gets the Middle East, etc.
Can I just stop you right there for 1 second? That sounds very similar to what many of the globalists have talked about with supranational government and various divisions, the Club of Rome, 10 divisions, United Nations, 10 divisions, European Union Commission, 10 divisions. Oh, wait a minute. Revelation, the book of Revelation, the 10 horns are 10 kings who've not yet received the kingdom, but will for 1 hour. Then you have 10 world leaders, 10 regions. So that's interesting that he is pushing for he's pushing for regionalism. They're calling it multipolarity, but we would maybe know it as regional governments, correct? Yeah,
well, see, there are occult roots to all of this. The globalists share the same occult roots as the communists. The Duginists, he's harvesting all these occult symbols that are known to various elites around the world and putting a new face on it, a new Russian face on it. But it's the same thing. But the goal of this multipolarity is that you'll have a Russian sphere of influence, a Chinese and Iranian, then they'll all gang up and destroy us. They'll obliterate it. Their goal is to obliterate the United States, not dominate, not just physically obliterate, then settle it with a few hundred million Chinese. That's their goal, and that's the goal of multipolarity. But you have serious conservatives talking about this as though this is going to be a permanent state of affairs, that you're going to have the Western Hemisphere, which will be American, and the Eastern Hemisphere, and the Russians will get all of Europe, and China will get the Far East and Africa, and Iran will get the Middle East, and we'll all live happily ever after. That is handing 80% of the world to our enemies, who will then gang up on us with no allies. We'll have no allies and destroy us. That's what multipolarity means. It's a way to destroy the United States forever, kaput, gone, finished, and all of the 330 million current occupants with it. So Dugin is an evil figure, but he's revered around the world amongst all these cultists. See, the communists and the MAGA communists love Dugin. They think he's a great philosopher who's going to change the world and influence leaders all over the world, and change the balance of power towards the Russians and the Chinese. And a lot of on the right, the MAGA, a few of the MAGA people, a lot of the alt-right, a lot of the neo-Nazis and white supremacists, and Tucker Carlson, love Dugin. They think he's going to save the white race from the Muslim hordes. So the right thinks he's a white supremacist, is going to save us from the Muslim hordes and the gays and whatever. And the left understand his goal is to destroy America, so that Russia and China can dominate the planet.
So basically, wait a minute.
Commands both audiences.
Yeah. So the right and the left are both into this guy, which really tells you the uniparty, the Hegelian dialectic, thesis and antithesis, and they're all pushing toward the same thing with a pincher strategy, right? We always talk about that.
It's a pincer strategy. And when I say right, I don't mean right like me and you. I mean, we're not talking about constitutional conservatives. We're talking about the semi-fascist right, the Jack Posobiec's, the Steve Bannons, the Tucker Carlsons, the anti-Semites, the David Dukes, the Richard Spencers, all of that kind of fake right. So that fake right is pro-Russian, and the left is pro-Russian. A great example was the Charlottesville debacle in 2017, where people were fighting on the streets and a couple of cops died and a young woman was killed rammed deliberately by a car. Well, that was pro-Russian rightists like Matt Heimbach and Richard Spencer and David Duke rallying the white supremacist pro-Russian right, fighting pro-Russian communists on the streets from the Party of Socialism Liberation, the Workers' World Party. So pro-Russian rightists were fighting pro-Russian leftists. And who got the blame? The Republican Party and President Trump and MAGA. That's a Russian operation right there. And that's how this is developing. The fake right, the woke right that James Lindsay is so ably talked about, is the Russian right. It's fascist, it's anti-Semitic, it's left, it's anti-constitution. It's not right in any accepted way. It is a variant of leftism. But Steve Bannon advocates for it. Jack Posobiec does. Tucker Carlson does. Candace Owens, Nick Fuentes. There's many, Alex Jones is a classic. They are promoting Russian propaganda to conservatives.
What's that right there?
Getting them to accept.
What's that right there on his desk?
The fourth political theory, that's, they talk about these stages of human development, the fourth political theory. And the fourth political theory is to do with Eurasianism, that the Eurasianist powers are going to dominate the globe. And unipolarity all comes out of this fourth political theory. The world was dominated by the old, he goes back to Carthage, Carthage and Rome. Rome was the land-based Eurasianist power. Carthage was the sea-going power, and they are evil. And the Romans said Carthage must be destroyed, and they did destroy it. And then you had the seagoing powers of America and Britain who did all this damage to the world, whereas the Eurasianist powers of Russia and etc. were persecuted and destroyed, nearly destroyed by these horrible seagoing powers. Well, now the fourth political theory is the rise of the Eurasianist powers. Russia and China and Islam are going to take over the world and destroy Britain, destroy Western Europe, destroy United States, and have a new era.
Why do they call it? Why do they call it Carthage?
Well, Carthage was a city in ancient Rome. Ancient Rome had their empire in Europe, and Carthage was a city in North Africa that had a great seagoing trading empire. And see, this is Dugin. The land-based powers, they're good. Those sea-based powers that trade and rip off and exploit and sell opium around the world, they're bad. So Rome had to destroy Carthage, just like now the Eurasianist powers have to destroy the United States and Britain, the big seagoing powers.
So they're now referring to...
It's all very spiritual. It's all very esoteric. When I say spiritual, it's esoteric. It's demonic. Mm-hmm. It's a twisting of history to suit the modern Russian state. Basically.
But they're calling the United States now, they're calling it United States Carthage.
Yes, we are Carthage. We must be destroyed. There was a famous Roman statesman who would do speeches, and any speech, whether it was on taxes or public urinals or whatever it was, he would end up, Carthage must be destroyed. And this is the basis of the fourth political theory.
Listen to
the
this.
Western powers must be destroyed.
Here we go.
Alexander Dugin is our guest for another 15 minutes or so. Then Mike Cernovich, who's hosting the fourth hour, is going to pop in with how right he was with his White House sources on the purge that's now evident. Or info.
Well, there you go.
Alexander Dugin.
I wonder how many times he's interviewed him. Now, I remember many, many years ago, people warning that Alex Jones, they thought, was basically pushing the Russian line.
Absolutely.
And then he seemed to successfully wiggle out of that and become more MAGA. But you've been suspicious of this guy. I think you've been suspicious of him and talking about him being one pushing the Russian line for probably 15 years at least, haven't you?
Oh, absolutely. Right from his earliest days. He wasn't originally, but he was getting money, I believe, from the people say he's getting money from the LaRouche people. And the LaRouche people are very much in with the Russians. Mm-hmm. Lyndon LaRouche was very deeply in with the Russians.
So tell me about, before we go to Carl Yarvin, because you are Curtis Yarvin. Curtis Yarvin is basically America's version of Dugin, I think you said to me on the phone. What do you make of Steve Bannon? What has happened? Full disclosure, our control room produced his show for 3 years. Well, we sure have learned a lot about him since then. And you used to go on Steve Bannon's program, but then all of a sudden you stopped appearing. And why on earth is CPAC?
He still says nice things about me.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, which he shouldn't. Look, Steve Bannon, I believe, has always been an opportunist. And a lot of these guys, military intelligence backgrounds, like Steve Bannon and Jack Posobiec, there's always been, I think he's always had this strong interest in the occult. And a lot of these military intelligence guys do. And I think he was led to Dugin. He had a 9-hour meeting with Dugin in Rome in 2018, where they discussed all sorts of geopolitical things. And since that time, Steve Bannon has worked in the interest of promoting the right-wing pro-Russian parties of Europe. We got to understand a lot of these so-called right-wing parties in Europe are not right-wing like America is. These are like Jean-Marie Le Pen, for instance, the AfD in Germany. These are Russian parties. These are very, very strongly pro-Russia, pro-Putin, etc. So they don't believe in the constitution like we do. They're more social fascist parties more than anything. And so he's been very busily promoting those parties. He's been insinuating himself into the Trump movement to get power and influence there, and very much steer America away from Ukraine for a start, because Ukraine is a stumbling block from Russia dominating Europe. and then more recently, his pro-Iranian and anti-Israeli stances. This is all in line with Russian propaganda. What Steve Bannon is doing, he has made Russian propaganda respectable for large chunks of the right.
What was his relationship with China? What was all that about?
Yeah, getting a lot of money from Miles Guo, who's a very suspect character and regarded by many as a leading Chinese agent. Steve Bannon should not have the respectability he does. He's a convicted fraudster for one. Collecting money for the border wall, but the money didn't go to the border wall. And but my main gripe against Steve Bannon, and I was always on friendly terms with him. I've promoted him in the past. I really understood Steve Bannon when the Ukraine war started, when he obviously took the side of the Russians and told repeated lies about the Ukrainian side of things. That's what flagged it for me. And since learning that he's a very much, involved in Dugin, promoting dark MAGA, which is really Duginism, promoting the Russian line at every opportunity. Yeah, I think Steve Bannon has definitely aligned himself with the Russian side of the political spectrum.
Tell me, before we get back to Curtis Yarvin, and he's kind of the American version of Alexander Dugin, where do you see things with this war? We're now reading today and hearing today that President Trump, apparently Pentagon approved deployment of a Marine expeditionary unit of about 2,500 Marines to the Middle East. They've got more warships on the way. They're trying to get the Strait of Hormuz opened up. Otherwise, this is really going to choke off fuel and trade, really hurt the economy globally. We have another, what is it called? Bab el something another strait that hardly ever gets mentioned. Can you throw a map of that up there, Logan, please? Logan, whatever it is called, that Bab el, whatever it is, that other strait that's not far away from the Strait of Hormuz. Those are two major areas for shipping. What do you make as to what this is all about? Obviously I'm for the state of Israel to exist. I don't want to see them hurt and damaged by Iran. At the same time, we have been cautioning since before the 12-day war, America needs to be very careful what we do. Maybe we just back up Israel, but we have to be very careful what we do because we have had an open border. We have a lot of terror cells here. We warned back before the 12-day war started that don't be shocked if we get involved in this. Terror cells start getting ripped and let loose. So we were trying to prepare the American people for what could happen. So here we are. We've had 3 or 4 terrorist attacks in the last 12 days. We've got Joe Kent, who I've interviewed a few times, who's now in a national security job, stating before Congress, a congressional committee, that there are 18,000 terrorists in the United States, 18,000 of them. I did the math on this last night, Trevor, and I just did 18,000. And let's just divide that 18,000 by the lower 48. Let's just say the lower 48. Let's not worry about Alaska and Hawaii. Just go to the lower 48. That's 375 terrorists per 48 states. 375. Let's say you divide those into 5-man terrorist squads, fully armed, explosives, drones, whatever, the small warfare stuff they can do today. And you divide that into 5-man teams. That's 75 5-man terrorist teams per 48 states. Now, can you imagine 75 terrorist attacks by 5-man teams being coordinated in every one of the 48 lower states on the same day? I don't know.
Spoil your day shopping in the supermarket, wouldn't it?
It would. And I don't know how one recovers from that. So,
well, it's look, we saw what a 22 guys did with the trade center and the economic damage that it did, blowing up dams, assassinating public officials, shooting up sporting arenas, firing mortars at a football game, who knows what they could be capable of doing. And it would shut down America overnight. And people would be in a state of terror, and people would be running out of medications, and supply chains would break down. Yeah, absolutely. We got to be prepared for all of this. And that's why I always say, and I know you sell a lot of survival gear, Bannon, but people should have it. And I don't get a commission for saying it. It's just common sense. We are heading for turbulent times. We've been saying, both of us, Bannon, for a year now.
Yep.
We expect kinetic stuff to happen this year.
Yep.
We've just seen 2 terrorist incidents in the last day. Well, how many more of them are waiting? And at least one of those was probably just a crazed lone wolf. But how many of them are organized teams? Let alone the Chinese nationals that are here as well, and many other foreign operatives. I don't know how Joe Kent gets us at 18,000 number, but I thought that was a little bit light personally.
I did too. So we're just going with the conservative number. I thought that was a low number as well, but hey, we'll just go with the conservative number. And I don't think the average American has a clue what it would mean if 5-man teams were released in 75 cities per state, and it happened in all 48 lower states. Your police would be overwhelmed. Your sheriffs would be overwhelmed. 911 would be overwhelmed. Your hospitals would be overwhelmed. And that's counting on the fact that you'd have sheriffs and police officers showing up to work. Some of them would say, for the pay that I'm getting, I'm sorry, I'm securing my family. I got to get my mom, my dad, or my mom, she's a widow. I got to get her. I got to get my kids. I got to get my niece and my sister's sister and her child. I mean, some of these guys start thinking about their extended family in the area, if they have extended family in the area, and they're not going to be worrying about hitting the streets. So you got to figure a percentage of your law enforcement that will not deploy, because they are humans with families too, and that's their first responsibility, is their own families, particularly for what we pay them. I don't think people are thinking like this. But back to my original question with that strait. Logan threw that up there, and thank you, Logan. So there's that other strait that people aren't talking about, Bab el-Mandeb. So we got and then we got the Strait of Hormuz off to the right. Okay, these are 2 major port areas. Benjamin Netanyahu is saying this thing is going to last longer. Okay, and he even came out today and said the regime itself may not fall. The regime itself may not fall. What are your concerns when it comes to this war and it being dragging on? And was President Trump walked into this scenario in order to stop him from being successful on a domestic level?
Well, all of that's possible. Look, and I would tell you straight, I'm in favor of taking out Iran, the mullahs. I think the president thought that he was just going to go in there and bomb it, and the people would rise up and chase the mullahs out and whatever. And that hasn't happened yet, though. 50,000 Kurds are marching into Iran right now to do exactly that. So I'm still pretty optimistic that this can be ended relatively quickly. And I'm very much in favor of President Trump's attempt to do this, because we were going to get all this anyway. They were preparing to attack us. They've been attacking us for years. Yep. They've been in a perpetual war with us since 1979, and they're about to get nuclear weapons, which they probably have. Yep. And they were going to use them. So President Trump's right to do this. What we should be blaming is Obama and Biden for getting the Iranians in a position where they could do this. And so,
which goes to the point: is this been a setup of Donald Trump the whole time? And you and I talked about that when he came into power the first time, and then we talked about it when he came into power the second time. Have the globalists set him up for failure? Not only economically, $39 trillion in debt, not counting the off-record debt, puts us over $200 trillion. All of the garbage we have going on economically. Now you have all the enemies that they've poured into the country during Biden, and all the empowerment of Iran, pallets of cash, all they've done. And now it's like, here you go, Donald, good luck with this. I mean, did they set him up for failure? Well,
there's probably a strong element of that, but Trump does have a talent for just crashing through things. I am still remain optimistic at this time that, yes, there would have been elements of setting him up. Yes, there may have been over-optimistic intelligence estimates, deliberately over-optimistic to fool Trump into doing this, but I still think it had to be done. And I wish Godspeed to the troops over there now trying to finish this regime
Okay, so
off.
what is
and to
Russia and
the
Iran's
Kurds.
objective with this? How are Russia and Iran using this to bring down America?
Well, Trump's made a major blunder here in
Russia and China, I should say. I'm sorry, Russia and China.
Well, lifting sanctions on Russia. Well, we know Russia and China are both supplying intelligence. And so was Trump told that Russia and China would sit this out, or was he? Is he surprised by the fact that they're openly supporting the Iranians? Who knows? There's so many factors and intelligence that we are not aware of. All I can say for sure is Iran had to be confronted. Iran had to be dealt with, and the strategy of carpet bombing, the military installations and that is good. But I think there will have to be troops on the ground over there to do this. I think that's probably going to be inevitable, but the goal must continue. The goal must be regime change, or all this effort is for nothing. And Trump gets no political advantage out of it whatsoever. It's a bit like, invading Normandy, fighting the Battle of the Bulge, marching across Europe, getting to the borders of Germany and saying, okay, we're done now. Hitler, you can stay in power, but don't do this again. That would be the analogy of not finishing the job.
So let's go back then to the tech bros here in America, Curtis Yarvin, Dark MAGA, etc. Because we have these guys now in America, particularly you say Curtis Yarvin is basically the American version of Alexander Dugin. And you got Tucker Carlson parroting some of this stuff. Here's a graphic. Dugin said back in November 13th, 2023, the modern West is an anti-Christian phenomenon and carries no cross with it or on itself. Christianity has nothing in common with material science, with the social and economic system of sheer greed. If the Muslim world does not clash with the West, it will be as with the civilization of Christ, but as with the civilization of the Antichrist. Then you have Tucker saying, if you're a Christian preacher calling for the rebuilding of the third temple, you kind of missed the whole point. That's more than apostasy. That's like not even knowing what the religion's about. This is not Christianity. It's not even a close facsimile of Christianity. It's clearly evil. Of course, I don't know many Christians calling for the rebuilding of the temple. We just watch that because we know that is in Bible prophecy and kind of gives us an idea of the timeline. Then you've got Dugin saying in 2024, Israel is determined to annihilate or deport the Palestinian population from Israel, demolish the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and commence construction of the third temple. Tucker in 2026 March said, now is the moment, right now, like this week, is the moment that people would like to begin the process of tearing down the Dome of the Rock, tearing down Al-Aqsa Mosque, and rebuilding the third temple. So a little bit of parroting, it sounds like, but we've got clips of Dugin.
Tucker Carlson consistently echoes Russian and Duginist propaganda. Virtually everything he says on Ukraine, on Israel, on Iran echoes the Russian line. Virtually always.
And you've got Dugin. We have a clip where Dugin's telling people they should be listening to Jackson Hinkle, Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, Alex Jones. Dugin, we played a video of him saying people should be listening to these folks. I mean, I'm not going to play it, but we've played it yesterday. But we have a video.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Well,
yeah.
There you go. This is what I've said. Candace Owens, Jackson Hinkle, Tucker Carlson, Steve Bannon, Jack Posobiec, all of the people that he just named are all conduits, whether they understand it fully or not, of Russian propaganda. And of course, Dugin is going to say people should be listening to these people because the goal is to create maximum division in the United States. Now, what's more divisive than Candace Owens saying that the Mossad killed Charlie Kirk? No proof, but it's now common currency amongst some people. Some of these Tucker Carlson saying that the Ukrainians are selling American weapons to the cartels. What's more divisive than that kind of thing? Or Tucker Carlson saying, having a guy on his show saying the Israelis shot a little boy point blank in front of them, where Mike Huckabee said, said, no, we found that little boy alive several days later and we got him out of the country with his mother. But Tucker Carlson repeats that kind of stuff ad nauseum because he is trying to divide the conservative movement on pro-Israel, anti-Israel lines, pro-Ukraine, anti-Ukraine lines, pro-Iran, anti-Ukraine lines. He is trying to destroy Reagan's conservative coalition. You know, when we grew up in the movement, Tucker, it was very easy to be a conservative. You supported Ronald Reagan, you supported Israel, you supported our European allies, you wanted strong borders, you wanted a strong military, small government, we loved the Constitution and respected Judeo-Christianity. That was a Christian, that was a conservative. Now you've got anti-Semitic conservatives, pro-Israel conservatives, pro-Russian, pro-Ukraine, MAGA conservatives, Rhino conservatives. The whole movement is split. And if you are the Russians, would you not want to destroy the movement that destroyed you? Would you not want to bring down the Reagan coalition in preparation for World War III? Well, that's exactly, whether they understand it or not, that's exactly why why Tucker Carlson, Steve Bannon, Alex Jones, Nick Fuentes, and all of these people are saying what they're saying, because it's all divisive Russian propaganda aimed to destroy the conservative movement in this country.
And here is a guy we talked about yesterday, Jackson Hinkle. I guess he's like the co-founder of a communist party here in America now?
Yeah, the American Communist Party, not to be confused with the Communist Party USA.
Exactly.
This is a new Communist Party headed by the other chap in the photo, Haz al-Din, who I debated actually on a show for a couple of hours.
Did you really? Where is that? Where is that?
That was with Tim Pool. I didn't really know who Haz al-Din was so much then, but I knew he was a MAGA communist. It was a 2-hour debate on Tim Pool's show a couple of years ago. Then I found out that Tim Pool was getting Russian money, and my air ticket was probably paid for by the Russians.
Oh,
but Jackson Hinkle, the former DSA guy, so was Haz al-Din. They've set up the American Communist Party, both big Duganites. And Tucker Carlson's had Jackson Hinkle on his show several times, calling him a conservative. He's the head of the American Communist Party.
Steve Bannon has had him on?
Feed. What's that?
Steve Bannon?
I'm not sure about Bannon. I'm not sure.
But who else did you just mention?
What did I say?
Who did you say has had him on several times, calling him a conservative?
Tucker Carlson has.
Tucker Carlson's had him on several times, calling Jason Hinkle a conservative.
Jackson Hinkle, a conservative.
Do you have any video clip of that we can pull, B-roll of that we can pull and show that, Logan, please?
It shouldn't be hard to find.
No, it won't. Logan can find it. What is MAGA communism? What is that? Is that the same thing as dark? Is that the same thing as dark MAGA?
Not quite, but well, MAGA communism is this. It is a Stalinist, pro-Russia, pro-China form of communism that is supposedly anti-woke. See, this is the big trick.
So Nick Fuentes, who's complaining about there's too many illegals here, the racism, the housing market, we can't afford houses, the boomers have all the money. Is that a form of communist MAGA?
Well, he is echoing their propaganda, but this is the thing. So we all hate woke, right? The pansy wokeness, the effeminate pastors, the pronouns, the constant harping about your racial identity, blah, 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 blah. We all know wokeism is Chinese consciousness raising. It's Maoism, right? It's Maoist brainwashing. So the Russians and the Chinese gave us woke. So a lot of young men are disgusted with it. You know, they feel they have no place in society. You're not allowed to be a man. You're not allowed to be a guy. Yeah, there you go, right there. You're not, so a lot of young men are very anti-woke. So what do the MAGA communists do? We are patriotic communists. We are not woke. You need to come and join us, and men are men and women are women in our movement, and we're going to bring a real communism to America, real patriotic communism. So the anti-woke movement, Putin's always gone on about hating wokeness. Tulsi Gabbard's always going on about hating wokeness. So's Steve Bannon. And we all hate wokeness. But the answer to wokeness is the American constitutional conservative republic. It's traditional America. It's traditional America, right? It's not fascism. It's not pro-Russian communism. It's not MAGA communism. It's none of these things. It's not Duginism
what would be some
or
of the policies?
Eurasianism.
What would be some of the policies they push that would be MAGA communism?
Major industrial products like Stalin, 5-year plans, an end to the feminizing of youth in schools, the end of the transgender ideology. They want to get rid of all of that. You know, that was given to us by one branch of, I know, and so are we all. But the answer, you got to do it through fascism, you see. You got to do it through communism.
So in other words,
wokeism is pansy communism, and the opposition is MAGA, masculine, tough communism.
So in other
either
words,
way is communist.
So you mentioned communism, mentioned fascism. Of course, they can go right with each other. So what you're really talking about here then is the way we deal with these problems is bigger government, more centralized control. I'll give you one. You tell me if you think this is MAGA communism. Okay, I'll give you one that I watch, and I'm like, I don't like that. One of them I would say is MAGA communism is when we come out, we say, we're going to make it where businesses, family businesses, corporations can't buy up private homes. We're going to put a moratorium on that. I'm like, no, sorry. I am not for the government telling businesses in that regard what they can do, or a family. Look, we have a family business here in town. I won't name the family, but it's a Jewish family, and they have a nice big building on Poplar Avenue, and they have a ton of apartments and complexes, probably one of the biggest property owners of rental properties and apartments and condos in the country. And it's a family business. It's a generational family business. They actually have a Jewish last name, by the way. And I know that my kids grew up with some of the children in that family. I think probably grandkids, great-grandkids of the founder. You're going to tell that family business they spent decades and decades and decades building that they can't go around and buy up private homes. Well, I don't like it. And I'm not a libertarian, but I watched a video by John Stossel saying the same thing. You know what percentage of businesses are going around buying up single-family homes to turn on rent? It's somewhere between 2 and 5%. So the problem of the country, the housing, is not free market capitalists that are buying up properties, which, by the way, a lot of times those are trash properties. Okay, we have seen that here in Memphis. We have seen it here in Memphis.
They gentrify them. That's exactly right. The MAGA communists, the woke right, are all about government solutions.
Yep.
You know, we believe in the free market. Let the free market sort it out.
Yep.
So what they do, they give us all this socialism, and they give us this wokeism, and we're all disgusted by that. The only solution is a strong government. The only solution is getting rid of those damn boomers who've ripped off all the resources. You know, the old class struggle argument. So they've given us two socialist alternatives: left-wing pansy socialism or a hardcore, tough, masculine socialism. And so these young guys...
When we put in these strict controls on who can buy houses, you're not going against the socialist communists. You're going against free market capitalist families that have bettered most cities. I got to say this so people understand. I don't know what goes on in every market, but I know what goes on in the Memphis market. And I can tell you, and I can take you to streets that 10 years ago, 15 years ago, were nothing but crack houses, okay? Disgusting, gross crack houses. And over that 10 to 15 years, some of these streets have turned completely over. Business people came in, bought these homes, gutted them, remodeled them, and rented them out. And one by one, you don't even recognize that street anymore. It is now a nice street providing base income for the tax base, housing for people who can afford to buy them. The problem is not the free market. And yet here's MAGA, here's President Trump saying, we're going to stop them from being able to buy and own maybe more than 100 houses. Says who?
Well,
that's not free market. That's not the private enterprise.
Yeah, well, and that's how the basic socialist ideas, the fascist ideas, are trying to infiltrate into the Trump movement. Yeah, then this comes through MAGA communism. This comes through the woke right. This comes through the sort of semi-fascist right, the Nick Fuentes types. Their solution is always more government. So you got a left-wing problem on the left. And so what's the answer? You have right-wing communists on the right to sort it out. And so we're given no alternative. We either go with left-wing communism or right-wing communism, and the old American republic, the constitutional republic, the free enterprise system is completely thrown by the wayside. So the so-called woke right is actually leftist. You know, Steve Bannon and Tucker Carlson, they are leftists. They are hardcore leftists. But they have insinuated themselves into the right and moved the debate, removed the Overton
Why do you think,
window.
Trevor, why would Steve Bannon ever interview you then? Why do you think he would ever even interview you?
Well, we used to, and when we were both trying to get Trump elected, when we were talking about Chinese communism, we had things in common. And I always got on fine with him. I never had an issue with him. It was only since the Ukraine war, when I saw him take a very, very strong pro-Russian side, that the penny dropped. That I started to look more deeply and found the Dugin connections and that kind of thing, and monitored him much more closely in terms of the messaging he portrays.
Okay.
Same with Jack Posobiec. I was on very friendly terms with Jack Posobiec. He's interviewed me, I interviewed him. But then you find all his tweets from 2017 praising Dugin and his absolute slagging of Ukraine.
What about Benny Johnson? That guy's kind of weird, isn't he?
Well, Benny Johnson is completely part of this crowd. You wouldn't believe a thing he says.
And they're destroying Turning Point, aren't they?
They are. Well, the goal is to basically turn either Turning Point into a sort of modern day Hitler Youth or destroy it.
Whoa, wait a minute. Repeat that phrase. The goal is to do what?
To basically turn Turning Point into a modern day Hitler Youth, a sort of MAGA, not a sort of woke right cult, or to destroy it. The vision of Charlie Kirk, unless these people like Tucker Carlson and Posobiec and that, unless they're thrown out of it, that organization is doomed.
Yeah, 100% agree with you there. Here's the book by Patrick Wood and Courtney Turner, Final Betrayal. Let's go to the American version of Alexander Dugin. You say is Curtis
Yarvin.
Yarvin, right. Dark Enlightenment architects like Thiel and Yarvin see this as the Sov Corp's triumph, I guess like a Soviet corp, a system where condition-based income enforces compliance and property dissolves into illusion. MAGA's vision of greatness has been hijacked, steering us toward a surveilled grid where sovereignty is a distant memory. As the puzzle nears completion, we must expose it now or be locked into this dystopia forever. I'm going to go to a few other quotes and get your response to this. See if these guys have it right, which I think they do. Curtis Yarvin,
Courtney and Patrick are right on this.
Curtis Yarvin, Nick Land, and the neo-reactionary movement represents a profound threat to the American self-government experience. Their philosophies, anti-democratic and technocratic, have infiltrated the halls of power, betraying the MAGA movement's promises of freedom and restoration. As we see in the swift changes post-inauguration, these ideas are not abstract. They are the engine driving the destruction of our constitutional republic. This darkness spreads through AI, cryptocurrency, and beyond. We urge readers to recognize the treason before it's too late. Let me go to another one. Well, if you want to make America great, you certainly wouldn't destroy its economic system. Yet this is exactly what the Dark Enlightenment wants to do. Yarvin does not champion capitalism any more than he does democracy. He's critical of both, seeing them as insufficient for achieving order and stability in society. He proposes instead a radical alternative rooted in anti-democratic, anti-capitalist principles, a centralized authoritarian government model on the efficiency and unity of corporate monarchy, not on democratic participation or market freedom. He does not merely seek to preserve the established order. He wants to overthrow it. Ever since 1932, technocracy has been trying to kill capitalism and the concept of free market economics. Initially, technocrats aimed to replace price-based currency with energy credits and eliminate private property altogether. Citizens were reduced to mere chattel to be cared for from cradle to grave. The accumulation of wealth was forbidden because your energy credit allotment would expire at the end of the period. And then, here we go. The Dark Enlightenment is rooted in anti-capitalism. It promises an age of abundance, or the golden age. It promises an age of leisure with minimal work required. To get there, it proposes to abandon money, debt, and interest entirely, replacing them with a new system based on cryptocurrency, blockchain, and artificial intelligence. Further, it will replace the constitutional republic with a monarchy. Is that all true in your perspective from your research?
It doesn't sound a lot like communism.
Yeah, it does.
You know, Curtis Yarvin's grandparents were both communists. He recently said that Marxism-Leninism is the only political system that has been proven to work in practice. The guy is pro-communist, but he has got the ear of J.D. Vance. He's got the ear of Darren Beattie at State. He's got the ear of Peter Thiel, who then, you know, and Tucker Carlson, who then engineered Tulsi Gabbard and is Trump's DNI, a woman who's with deep connections to the MAGA communist movement. So, yeah, that's absolutely right. See, Curtis Yarvin believes that the Constitution was a mistake. The Reformation was a mistake. He echoes Dugin, and Dugin has praised him that we need this sort of theocratic religious world that will put everybody in its place, like a feudalism where you're born into a certain place and that's where you stay your entire life. It's a combination of feudalism and communism run by technocrats. Can you think of a worse world to live in, Bannon, than that? Because I can't.
No. You mentioned the guy that used to be at Revolver, Darren Beattie, or what's his name?
Darren Beattie, yeah.
He's at State Department. I read today he's
head of cultural affairs at State. Yeah.
Yeah, I read today he's going to be moved over to deal with Brazil.
Well, that's interesting. I wonder what he's going to do there.
Well, I'm wondering, does that fit in with this whole technate North American Union kind of thing?
Well, you can see this. You know, Trump's out there trying to protect the Western Hemisphere, trying to get get rid of the Cuban communists, get rid of the Russians and Chinese out of Venezuela, which I applaud. But it seems to be that he's willing to hand over Eastern Europe in exchange for that, which ties in very much with Yarvinist and Duginist foreign policies. So while I very much enjoy what Trump's doing with Venezuela and Cuba, etc., we've got to understand that if we lose Europe, we're done. If we lose Asia, we're done. We cannot survive as a Western Hemisphere on our own because we'll be facing all of the world against us from that point. So this is the influence of Yarvin. This is the influence of Dugin filtering into the MAGA movement, betraying the MAGA movement, like Patrick Wood and Courtney Turner have just said, taking the better instincts of MAGA and sidelining them in favor of this dark MAGA, this dark enlightenment, this semi-fascist version of MAGA, which is not the MAGA I signed up for, and I'm sure not what most of the Tea Party movement signed up for either. We want the Constitution. We want a free enterprise America, a sovereign America, a traditional America. That's what we want. None of this dark enlightenment, none of this Yarvinism, none of this Duginism, and we need to work real hard to get it out of our movement. It's a cancer.
It is a cancer. They took over the Tea Party. Now they're taking over MAGA. And you know what I'm also seeing?
MAGA's our last hope.
And what I'm
really
also seeing
our last hope
is you have so-called conservatives running around calling for an Article 5 convention. That's the dumbest thing in the world. I mean, Phyllis Schlafly and I dealt with that together for so many interviews. I mean, you really want to open up that can of worms to open a convention that they think they can control, which they cannot. But yet who's pushing it? So-called Christian homeschool leaders and conservatives.
Yeah, and this is this is why you go to conservative conferences and people talk about multipolarity like it's a good thing, because they're being completely sucked in by the enemy. So you get all these decent Christian people who think all our problems are going to be solved by opening up the Constitution to whatever communist wants to get in there and influence it. Look, if you're ever going to change the Constitution, I'm not saying there can't be some things tinkered with at some point, but you do it in a position of strength. When we've got 80 conservative senators and 350 conservative Congress members and 50 hardcore conservative state legislators, then I might entertain a little bit of tinkering, maybe, but not when the Democrats run a whole bunch of states and a whole bunch of feckless rhinos would be involved in it. It's just suicide. But the Russians and the Chinese know how to manipulate our better selves to participate in our own suicide. And they've done that over Ukraine. They're doing it now over Israel. They're doing it over some of Trump's policies, and they're trying to do it over a convention of state to get the good people to help destroy our country.
So how does this end, you think? I mean, don't give me the rosy, what you think people want to hear. I want the straight. How does this end? When you have people like Nick Fuentes being mainstreamed, Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, when you have the infiltration, it looks like, of Turning Point USA, so many of our conservative groups, Christian groups, how does this end? Do you see it? Because my concern is that what we've been trying to do here for 36 years and teach worldview and understanding worldview and the values, that your values are based on your worldview and your conduct is based on your values. If you don't understand these worldview wars and philosophies, you cannot fix the problem. Know your enemy. And I don't think that we have enough people that understand these things or have the attention of a gnat. You know, I read today a new, I think it's Pew poll that shows the amount of religious people in the Bible Belt dropping. It's dropping. It's still the most religious area, but the numbers today were equivalent to like 2007 on the West Coast and the East Coast. And now that's the equivalent of what's going on in the Bible Belt. The problem is, my friend Norm Geisler used to say, in the Bible Belt, we don't have enough Bible under our belt. The majority of the churches here in the Mid-South are dead. They're nothing but social clubs. They really are only interested in nickels and noses, getting you in there and then pressuring you to cough up 10% of your income, which is not in the Bible for the New Testament church. The tithe is for old Israel. We're not Israel. They build buildings and social programs to attract people, nickels and noses. It's a corporation. And that's if the churches that haven't been taken over by hyper-Calvinism, which completely dismisses evangelism because you might be wasting your time because you're not preaching to the elect and you don't know who is, so you don't do evangelism. And I can just tell you, living here, the South, the churches are dead. I have people that are friends of mine in their early 80s who cannot find a good Bible teaching church. They used to. They raised their kids in them under Adrian Rogers and other people, but that generation is dead and gone. The churches in the South are dead. If that's the state of the condition of the South, we're in big trouble because the rest of the country is worse.
Yeah, because ultimately this is a spiritual thing.
Yes.
And the lack of discernment amongst Christianities is through the roof. So, modern Christianity and evangelicalism is split many ways, just like the conservative movement is. And so none of that bodes well. Like, if we didn't have enemies, we could muddle through this and we could get out the other end and we could have a revival, and as we've done before. But the problem is we got Russia and China and Iran knocking on our doorstep trying to destroy us. And all we need is one bad election, the next midterms coming up. If the Republican Party is routed and the Democrats take over the House and maybe even the Senate, we're going to have nothing but impeachments for 2 years, then a Democrat communist president, and then amnestying of all the illegals to the left and the end of America. So looking at it that way, it looks pretty bleak. But on the other hand, you do see a very deep stirring of religious sensibilities amongst young people. Some of that's going into the woke churches, but a lot of it's going traditional as well. Some of it's been captured by the Russians. A lot of the young Orthodox guys are being captured by the Russians. But I still see a stirring of patriotism and of religious feeling that I haven't seen before in my lifetime. So I'm not altogether bleak But I do think things are going to get a lot worse before they get better economically, spiritually, politically. And we could have civil war and the destruction of this country. I think the Republic and our very survival hangs in the balance. It could go either way. And we're going to need every little bit of God's help here, Brennan.
Indeed.
Every single bit. And as my good friend Karen Siegerman says, if we want God's help, we need to be miracle worthy. We need to be courageous and faithful to have any chance of survival here.
Let me close with this, Trevor. This Carrie Pergine, whatever her face name is, who was on the Religious Liberty Commission and just hijacked that meeting to go after the Jews, I think, sitting there and tech Zionists and Christian Zionists. They just dropped an interview today between her and, of course, Tucker Carlson. Does the Christian catechism require loyalty to Benjamin Netanyahu? Question mark. That's a stupid question. Of course it doesn't. And no one is calling. See, these are all straw men. No one is calling for loyalty to Benjamin Netanyahu. I've been very critical of Benjamin before the October 7th war. I actually said twice in a very heated monologues that I thought he was too busy kissing the ring of Biden and not protecting his own country. And voila, October 7th happened. I've been quite critical of him with turning his people over as lab rats to Pfizer. So, Tucker, you know that's not legit. You're an idiot. You're more than that. I think you're an antichrist. The Bible says there'll be many little antichrists before the beast is revealed. I think Tucker Carlson's job, among others, is the destruction of biblical Christians and the setting up of biblical Christians in America. I think Tucker's job, in my opinion, his job is to be seen as the source of all trouble, Bible-believing, dispensational Christians, particularly Christian Zionists, in America. That's his job. This guy is of the devil. That's my theological opinion. Your thoughts on
Well, I couldn't dispute that, Bannon. You know, I don't know his motivation, but it's destructive. It's very destructive. He's one of the most destructive people in America today. And because he was a lone truth teller for so long, many people were sucked into believing him. It's only in the last 2 or 3 years that people have really seen the true Tucker Carlson come out. He was playing a role up to then. Now you're seeing the true destructive.
Is he CIA?
I think he hates. No, I just think he hates America. I think he's probably a British Israelite who believes that Putin's going to save the world and impose order on the world. And I believe he hates this country. I think he thinks this country is decadent and beyond redemption.
What would his father think of him?
I think his father would be just turning in his grave. You know, his father was a real patriot, and maybe that's part of his thing. Maybe this is he's got his daddy issues coming out. You know, his daddy was a super patriot, and Tucker's the opposite. And maybe there's a connection there. Just why did Satan rebel against his father God?
Well, I'll tell you, it's his boy, I think, that's in JD's office that we were dealing with when we were trying to set up an interview last year, a year ago, this May, with JD. And I'm telling you right now, I don't want to interview JD. I think JD is dangerous.
Yeah, I think so. And I'm look. JD was not invited. Neither JD or Tulsi Gabbard was invited into the planning on the Maduro operation. Neither of them was also invited into the planning of the Iran operation. Why? Because I don't think they're trusted, as they should not be. And I think thankfully, JD has no chance of succeeding Trump in the next election. I think
what do you make of Marco Rubio? Would he be a good candidate?
Well, I like a lot of Rubio does, but I have my misgivings about him too. You know, his Gang of Eight stuff and this kind of thing. But he's, of those around at the moment, he's the best and most likely candidate. I think he's more sensible, but maybe someone else again. But that's if we even get to that stage, if we get to that election, Bannon. So who knows? But not JD. No way, JD. At all.
100%.
Marco I'd take a lot quicker, but it's still not my ideal candidate.
Well, we need to be vigilant.
When have we seen one? When has an ideal candidate appeared on the horizon?
Yeah. We need to be vigilant. We need to understand the times. We We need to prepare spiritually, physically, economically. These are very perilous times. And to be honest with you, so many of my friends that are real Bible teachers, experts on Bible prophecy, eschatology, theology, they never dreamed that they would be here to see this. They thought the church will have been removed by now. And I don't know, people hold a different eschatology and believe different things in the Christian world about when the church will be removed and if it will be removed before the tribulation, the middle of the tribulation, after the tribulation. And those are all debates we can have. I have my eschatology. The audience knows that. But a lot of my friends never believed the church would still be here to be seeing these things unfold. And we are living in perilous times. The Bible says that. Know ye this, that perilous times will come. And then it lists all these things will be happening. I see as our mission duty is ours and the results belong to the Lord. The Great Commission is still our calling, preaching the gospel. And then after people become saved through the power of repentance and believing in the death, burial, resurrection of Christ, to teach them how to live. And that means teaching them how to live, even if that means America is crumbling around us. We still have the Great Commission. We're to occupy till the Lord returns.
He comes, Look, we all have our own end time scenarios. And Jesus didn't know when he was coming back. So how do we know? But the point is, you don't stop paying your mortgage. You don't stop mowing your lawn. You don't stop changing your underwear because of what you believe in the end times. You occupy till he comes. You pay your bills. You do your duty. You spread the gospel. You work to defend your country. You do what is right. You restrain evil to the last second. I saw ISIS obliterate Christianity in northern Iraq, slaughtering people, burning villages, obliterate. I didn't see one of those people get raptured. Not one of them. But clearly American Christians, who are the fattest, the richest, and the laziest Christians on the planet, are all going to get raptured and spared this because God loves American Christians more than he loves Iraqi Christians, right?
Well, I don't doubt the idea of the rapture, but what I'm saying is that we have no guarantee that we won't go through the same thing that these people you're talking about will go through. Yeah. We have no guarantee we won't go through what they went through in Cuba, behind the Iron Curtain. We have no guarantee that we will be raptured before some of these things happen. Do I believe we'll be here when the wrath of God's being poured out? No. But that doesn't mean that we won't be here during the times that are coming, some of these times that are coming. And I don't know what that'll be. Look at what Tim Boom's family went through, right? When they were hiding the Jews and they all ended up dying but Corey. I mean, there are so many examples and people would have thought, well, surely we'll be spared from this. But you know what? There's a special blessing, a special crown for those who are martyrs. So I agree with you. We can't sit here and say, we're not going to go through hard times. We're not going to go through tough times. We'll get spared all this. That's not going to happen. But what's really sad is, I think the majority of Christians that I talk to in the Bible Belt, they have no interest in these topics. They have no understanding and they have no interest. In fact, when you try to talk to them about the book of Daniel or the book of Revelation, a lot of them will say, I don't understand it. It can't be understood. And it scares me. I don't want to hear it. I know a pastor that was preaching through the book of Revelation here in our town. And some of the older folks in the church said, let us know when you're done preaching through Revelation on Sunday morning. We'll be back. But it's too scary. I don't want to hear it. I'm like, are you kidding me? I just taught through the book of Revelation for a year and a half. It's only scary for the unsaved. For the believer, you end up coming away with, wow, all of these things are lining up. They're there in Daniel. They're there in Revelation. Shows you that God is in full control. It shouldn't give you fear. It should cause you to rest in a sovereign Lord who does have control of what's happening. Yes, we live in a sinful, fallen world. He's using the simple choices of man to accomplish his ultimate purpose. But I believe in Romans. All things do work together for good to those who are called according to him. So the problem here in my area is in the Bible Belt, even the Christians don't want to engage and talk about these things. They don't want to know. They don't want to hear it. They just want enough of Jesus to feel a spiritual salve. That's it.
That's it. They think they've made a confession. They put money in the plate. They're good for eternity.
Yep.
And my point was, well, the Iraqi Christians weren't spared. The Nigerian Christians weren't spared. The American Christians, who could have stopped, by not electing Obama, could have stopped the slaughter in Iraq, who could stop the slaughter of the Nigerians, but don't do anything, somehow think they're going to be spared that kind of stuff. Where is the justice in that? Those of whom much is given, much is asked. American Christians have more wealth, more time, more resources than any Christian in world history. And what do they spend it on? Nothing of any use. But they're going to get a special privilege and get spared all this and go to heaven forever. I think this is just delusional thinking. Absolutely delusional. The Christians who are going to make it are the Christians who fight to the very end for what is right.
Well, I'll tell you what a lot of the Christians in our area are for. And I live in a very affluent community for the most part. And that's what several pastors have told me. This is the hardest area to pastor because people have so much disposable income. The families in our area, they all live for the next vacation. They all live for the next cruise, the next Dollywood, the next Disney World, the next, let's go to Destin, let's go to Seaside. They're all living for the next vacation. And these folks vacation. Spring break, this town is empty. Fall break, this town is empty. I'm not opposed to people taking vacations, but I'm telling you, we are living in an area where people are largely interested in simply pursuing pleasure. It's about pleasure and entertainment. There seems to be no interest by even a majority of them to understand the times and say, how will this impact my children and grandchildren? What do I need to do? You hold an event in the Mid-South, the Bible Belt, and you will get hardly anyone to show up. Hardly anyone. That's been the way it's been for decades here. But you go up to Minneapolis, you go to Milwaukee, you go to where it really costs you to be a Christian, they will pack in. We've got the stats to prove it. So maybe at the end, what I just said is, maybe persecution is what the country needs. Maybe some good old-fashioned persecution is what we need, because historically, that's what you see when revivals come, persecution. Maybe that's what's coming to America. Maybe we're about to get what we deserve, and God will use it in the spiritual world for a revival.
I think that's probably best case scenario right now, Bannon. But yeah, the point is, it's down to all of us. You know, God spared whole cities for the sake of a few righteous men.
That's true.
You know, and that's the remnant is what's going to get us through this. And if you're not part of the remnant, don't expect to spend your life in eternal bliss on a harp, sitting on a cloud with a harp. You know, the way is narrow. Not many people are going to get there.
That's right.
The people who are lazy and fat and complacent while the world burns around them are not good candidates as far as I'm concerned.
Well, that's because there's the fruit. You know, I'm not into works-based religion. I don't think you are either. But Matthew 25 shows that when the Lord's judging the Gentile nations at the end of that 7-year tribulation, it wasn't their works that saved them. Their works were not the root of their salvation. Their works were the fruit of their salvation.
Yes,
and
exactly.
what I see is there's very little fruit among most self-described Christians in America. And the fact that there's so little fruit and so little discernment and so little desire to understand from the scriptures what's happening, that's a very bad sign for a lot of these people. They have bought the Joel Osteen model that this is your best life now. And sadly, for many of them, this is the closest they're going to get to heaven for a lot of them. I hate to say it.
Yeah, like a friend of mine says, hell is going to be full of angry church people chasing their pastors around with pitchforks.
Yep. A lot of people are going to be very concerned. How did I get? Well, that's what it says in Matthew 25. But Lord, didn't we cast out demons in your name and do this in your name? And he says, depart from me, I never knew you, your worker of iniquity. TrevorLoudon.com. You'll find all of his great articles, his books. Go to shop now at TrevorLoudon.com, and you'll find so many of his books. And by the way, these books are historical books because they tell you about many of the major players and their communist and Islamic backgrounds. These are such important books, and they tell you about the organizations that are still around, funding and pushing a lot of these candidates. You'll find it all there. at trevorloudon.com, trevorloudon.com. Trevor, as always, thank you. You're a wonderful treasure and of wealth and information and knowledge. And thank you for talking to us tonight about Alexander Dugin, MAGA communism, how the MAGA movement is being hijacked so that we can understand it and warn our family and friends about many who are helping to push this propaganda.
Thank you so much, Brandon. Thanks for the opportunity, and a big thank you to the audience.
Thank you. Trevor Loudon checking in tonight, trevorloudon.com. Do you guys appreciate what we do here? There's another long format interview with no commercial breaks. No commercial breaks. You know, the greatest way you can fund us, folks, is worldviewfoundation.com. Worldviewfoundation.com. If we have support, we can go long periods of time without commercial breaks. If we don't get the support, we're going to have to stop these long format interviews and interrupt every 10 minutes with a commercial. Do you know we have companies emailing us? I saw another one today saying, we want to be involved in the advertising. We want to drop in our advertising. Do you know we can turn this over to companies? We can turn this over to companies who will put us on a clock and drop in advertisements for Toyota and car manufacturers and all kinds of stuff. And they will pay us. They will pay us to give them control over our broadcast clock and drop in advertising. And we can go to commercials about every 10 to 12 minutes. But if you will support our foundation, we don't have to do that. If you support us through worldviewtube.com/sponsors, we don't have to do that. So how many of you like these long format interviews without all the commercial breaks? Well, if you do, I need your support. Worldviewfoundation.com. Listen, can you not afford $10 a month, $20 a month? You get busy, life gets busy. Go to worldviewfoundation.com, set up an automatic monthly contribution right now. Worldviewfoundation.com. $10 a month. It adds up. When 1,000 people do $10 a month, that's $10,000. Are you telling me there's not a lot of you out there that can not afford $10 a month? I think there's a lot of you out there that can afford $10 a month. But you just think, oh, he always seems to keep the network going. He doesn't need my $10 a month. I look at what some of these groups are bringing in, millions and millions of dollars a year. I'm like, how on earth do they do that? We're doing far more than they do. I think one of the problems here, to be honest with you, is that we are too deep. That's one of the quote problems from a marketing standpoint. We're too deep. We go too deep. We're not catering to people that are an inch deep and a mile wide. If we would cater to the inch deep and a mile wide, we'd have more viewers and probably more money, because there are not a lot of discerning, smart people left in America. I'm sorry, they're not. The average American's a ding-a-ling. You know it. I know it. I say it. You want to say it, but you don't have the guts to say it, so I'll say it for you. The average American is stupid. Go to your local grocery store. They're wearing their stinking pajamas in the grocery store. The average American is been dumbed down. And if you want to appeal to the masses, you better keep it an inch deep and a mile wide. Well, I don't want to appeal to the masses. So obviously the pool of people that we have that are interested in this is a smaller pool of people. It's kind of like the Marines, the few, the proud, the Marines. This program is not for everyone, because a lot of people out there couldn't even understand the vocabulary we use. And that's not, and we by design don't use a lot of big $20 words. And if we do, we define them, because we're trying to bring on new people. But by the very nature of this broadcast, it is a smaller audience, because we're not catering to the masses. We're catering to people that want to know the truth, that love the truth, that want to have discernment, they want to have knowledge, they want to have wisdom. So by the fact that we program accordingly means we have a smaller audience. And if you like the fact that we are programming for truth, knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, and you want to keep it this way, we need your support, or we are going to have to go to giving our advertising over to a company and have breaks every 10 minutes and sell Chevrolets and Jeeps and Toyotas and carpet cleaner. So some of you that watch who can afford the 10, 20 bucks a month and aren't doing it, get on the computer right now and set up an automatic contribution at worldviewfoundation.com. Or you'll find our mailing address there. Again, you can also use some of the great products at worldviewtube.com/sponsors. A lot of great products there. A lot of these products you need anyway. So why not buy products that are great products, good for your health, great products for cleaning in your house without breathing in all kinds of horrible chemicals. We got all kinds of great stuff there at worldviewtube.com/sponsors. We got a lower third for that one. worldviewtube.com/sponsors. Okay. So what you just heard, folks, what we just got from this over 1 hour now doesn't come cheaply. And we did it without one commercial break. So please support us, will you? All right. I'm going to be back, Lord willing. Roll the music Sunday night, 8 p.m. Central, 9 Eastern Standard, as I teach through the book of Daniel. Isn't that interesting? Multipolarity, that's the idea of regional governments. And what do we see? What do we see in the book of Daniel? Daniel chapter 2, a revived Roman Empire with 10 toes. Timing's pretty perfect, isn't it? That's where I'll be Sunday night in the book of Daniel chapter 2. Join me if you would, worldviewtube.com, worldviewtube.com, Sunday night, 8 p.m. Central, 9 Eastern Standard. Till next time in Brandon House, may God save America. Take care.
Faith, spiritual values, moral issues, government, economy, education, work, responsibility. What we think about these depends on our worldview. Now, VCY America presents Worldview Radio with Brannon House.
I'm glad you're with us. We're going to be joined by Patrick Wood. I want to talk about MAGA communism. What is MAGA communism? What are some of the things that are being proposed that really is not free market capitalism, but is really, you could call it fascism, big government, big business merging together. You could call it communism, depriving you of your private property. You could call it communism in that it will promise you leisure. You won't have to work. You'll just get a government check. Basic mandatory income. That sounds like communism, doesn't it? You can have your robots doing all the work. You'll have so much time for leisure. What is MAGA communism? Let's get to that. And is one of the main goals of Tucker Carlson to set up real Christians for persecution? Because I'm starting to think that's his job. That his job is really to set up Christians for persecution. His interview, I guess, has dropped that he did with Carrie Perjean, the woman that was, I guess, just turned Catholic, but now all of a sudden is an expert on Catholicism, speaking for all Catholics, because no Catholics are Zionists, she says, which a lot of the Catholics online like, wait a minute, I'm a Catholic and a Zionist? But she's been a Catholic a year, but she now speaks for everybody. She's the popist. She's the popist. He just interviewed her, of course. And again, she's going to tell you how I'm a Christian and this is what real Christianity is. And I think, again, Tucker's job, in my opinion, is to point to the Christians, the dispensationalist, the Christian Zionist, and say, these are the problem. These people are the problem. Let's get to that more. Now, before we go to Patrick, I had the opportunity a few times to interview Joe Kent. Joe Kent now is in the Trump administration in an area of national security. His wife actually was killed by ISIS overseas when she was over there dealing with the intelligence arena. He has a few children. Sad story. And I interviewed Joe in person in Dallas. And I think I had him on via technology as well, but I've interviewed him in person. And he did make it into the Trump administration. He ran for Congress, didn't make it there, but he made it into the Trump administration. Do you guys remember the testimony that he gave in December of 2025? Because we played it here, but I think we got to play it again. December 2025. And he said there are 18,000 terrorist-tied, jihadi-tied individuals that came over the border during the Biden regime. 18,000. Now, I think there's probably more than that here, but let's just go with his figure, 18,000. I think that's a conservative figure, but let's just go with his figure. I did some math last night. Pulled out the old calculator. Did a little math last night. Because we've now had, what, 3 or 4 terrorist attacks? You had the guy out in Austin who had the sweatshirt on that said property of Allah and the Iranian flag under that. Then we had the terrorist attack at the synagogue in Michigan yesterday. Then we had the terrorist attack in Virginia, Old Dominion University. I feel like I'm missing one. Oh, the New York City where they threw the bomb that didn't go off. So that's 4 in 1 week. Folks, it's going to get a lot worse, I'm afraid. This is just beginning, I'm afraid. We now are hearing that President Trump is going to put 2,500 Marines on the ground in the Middle East to deal with the Strait of Hormuz. We've got to get that thing opened up again. Again, what did we tell you? Wars are always more costly and last longer than the war planners plan. And this war is not over. And in fact, it could last weeks. And that's on the positive side, more likely months. And Benjamin